Good morning and happy upcoming Valentine's Day on this Sunday, February 13th. We are so glad that you've joined us today. I'm Martha Pakula and I'll be your service leader. Welcome to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist congregation. I especially welcome those of you who are watching our channel for the very first time. Thank you for joining us. And as we know, the church has been closed to protect our congregation from COVID. And we all have that need. We all do. And it's been a long time to see each other and join in community. Well, I'm very pleased to announce UUUC will be open again for live services on Sunday, February 27th at 10:30. Be patient as we attempt to get back to regular live in-person services. One must be fully vaccinated and masked to attend and must follow sign-in protocols. Having your vaccination card copied and on file in the office is requested. Now, the board is currently working with the Sunday Services Committee on the details of how all of this is going to happen. Our ultimate goal, we're not sure exactly how and when, but we're not quite there yet, perhaps, it is to live stream our services so those of you who are not able to attend can participate in the services. We are using the equipment that we purchased with the Chalice Lighters grant from the Chalice Lighters of the Pacific Western region, of which we are a member, and we have 2 calls a year that people in our congregation send in contributions as requested. You sign up for it, so that we qualify for these grants. We've received 2 grants this year. Our Chalice Lighter ambassador is Lillian Fifield. Our speaker today is Reverend Dennis Reynolds, who is currently serving the UU Church of Eugene as Minister of Social and Environmental Justice. He'll be available for a post-service discussion on Zoom. Use the link from your weekly UmQuest. And check-in is at 11:15. Discussion is at 11:30. We thank Jake Tranter and Lucy Swangham for their work on producing this week's recorded service.
Our chalice lighting today is from the Canadian Unitarian minister, Rev Deborah Falk. A chalice in our midst is the symbol of our religious faith.
A faith built on the foundations of freedom, reason, and welcome.
A faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice.
A faith that envisions a world flourishing with equality for all people.
A faith that demands the living out of goodness.
A faith that requires the thoughtfulness.
A faith of wholeness.
This tiny flame is the symbol of the spirit of the spark of all which is in each of us.
Our opening hymn that I selected for this morning's service is Siahamba. It's a very special hymn to me, and I hope you consider it as you're willing and able to join in singing along with the recording. I first met Siahamba at a Unitarian Universalist winter gathering at Seabeck Conference Center. And I've also had the opportunity to sing it at the dedication of a preschool with Zulu women in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. Siahamba.
Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos, Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos, Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos, Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos, Siahamba, hamba, Siahamba, hamba, Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos, Siahamba, hamba, Siahamba, hamba, Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos. We are marching in the light of God. 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 We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos, Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos, Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos, Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos, nyen kwenkos, Siahamba, hamba, Siahamba, hamba, Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos, nyen kwenkos, Siahamba, hamba, Siahamba, hamba, Siahamba kukanyen kwenkos.
I'd like to dedicate our time of brief meditation with a bit of movement this morning to the Vietnamese Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh, who died just a couple of weeks ago in his early 90s, having returned in his 80s to his home country of Vietnam after spreading concepts of mindfulness across the globe. Let's do a version of, in his honor, a meditation we do many times in this community that I've shared with you before, a movement meditation that begins with hands open in front of you to receive whatever comes, and bring whatever comes to you as you inhale to your heart. Hold it for a beat. Hold it as though your life depends upon it. And when the time comes, exhale and let it go. Open hands and hold. Inhale and hold. Exhale and let it go. In, hold, Let's just hold our hands silently open for a time. Letting the breath flow in and out together. And one last cleansing breath deeply in and out. Thank you.
Our reading today is by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, an Anglican archbishop and leader in the struggle for justice and deep peace in South America, who died this past December. He was co-author with the Dalai Lama of the Book of Joy.
I'm going to stop us and suggest we redo it because you did South America.
Did I? I did. And I have South Africa. I am so glad that you...
And also, maybe rearrange the mic so it's pointed towards you.
Where do- Yes? You want to do it for me, please? I'm also going to remove one archbishop.
Yeah, I know, I caught that and did it in the most recent version, but that wasn't the version I sent you until this morning.
Okay. Are you, is it okay now?
Still going, go ahead.
Oh, we're still going. Take 12. Our reading today is by Desmond Tutu, an Anglican archbishop and leader in the struggle for justice and deep peace in South Africa, who died in December. He was co-author with the Dalai Lama of the Book of Joy. Discovering more joy does not save us from the inevitability of hardship and heartbreak. In fact, we may cry more easily, but we will laugh more easily too. Perhaps we're just more alive. Yet, as we discover more joy, we can face suffering in a way that ennobles rather than embitters. We have hardship without becoming hard. We have heartbreaks without being broken. Our speaker today, Dennis Reynolds, came to the ministry after a 30-year career as a preschool teacher and administrator at the University of Oregon. He has since retired to Eugene after serving churches in Oregon and in Washington State, and as hospital chaplain. He has been an activist locally and globally. He believes that the most powerful sermons are often those written with a religious text in one hand and a current news source in the other. He enjoys lifelong learning and the practice of crafting sermons. Our congregation always enjoys his wisdom and wit and his ability to share his authentic self with us. Dennis.
I have a kind of confession to make. On the day we are recording this sermon, and likely still when we gather to discuss it on Sunday, I am more than a wee bit jet-lagged as I arrived from South Africa just 20 hours ago. And the time difference between here and the Pacific coast is 10 hours. To put that into context, when we began a 10 a.m. worship here, it's 8 p.m. that same day in Cape Town. When we have lunch, they are getting ready for bed. For the last month, I've been sleeping while you folks are awake, and you have been awake while I have slept. It will take a few days for my body to adjust to our home time zone. Global travel across time zones can be daunting, and though it can be taxing for the body for a time, it can also be deeply rewarding for our minds and our hearts and our spirits. I have been privileged in recent years to travel internationally quite a bit, including to a number of countries to which I never would have imagined going. As a young man, my most extensive and farthest away travel was the year I spent on the Hawaiian island of Maui. There I took a kind of sabbatical from college and from the intense student activism I had become part of. That was some 50 years ago. After I returned from Maui, my longest journeys were to the Oregon coast, often to our family's little house in Walport, or heading into the Cascades, hiking, or just being in the woods. When my kids were little, their needs and interest, and the simplicity of having a base of operation made trips to the beach house a good option. Backpacking became, for a time, car camping. This began to change as my kids and my income grew. My options and my inspiration for travel expanded even more when the kids one by one grew up and left home. Concurrently, I began to have work-related options to travel to conferences and such, and whenever possible, I extended these opportunities by a few days to just see and be in a different locale. When two of my three kids went to colleges on the East Coast, Lindsay to Wesleyan University in Connecticut, and Nick to Haverford, a small Quaker college in Philadelphia, I tried to go east to spend more time with them as well. Lindsay kept going even further afield, first as an undergraduate and later in graduate school doing research, mostly in South Africa, but also in the Republic of Chad. That latter country I had to look up on a map to even find out where it was. Lindsay's travels inspired and encouraged me to travel more myself, and I began to do so, sometimes simply following her. Since 2009, I have been to South Africa and to Haiti, two countries definitely not on my list of possible destinations. The latter trip was as part of a group of Unitarian Universalist seminary students who went there to pilot a new program that has since become the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's College of Social Justice. There we worked with a peasant cooperative, and I learned much about community and connection and the reality of my incredible economic privilege. On my first trip to South Africa, I stayed with Lindsay and her then partner Thomas, who were both doing doctoral research at the intersection of anthropology and public health. They became my tutors on Zulu culture. Suzanne, my wife, has become an enthusiastic partner in global travel. Our journeys have included additional trips to South Africa, where Lindsay has now settled, and a trip to visit her goddaughter in Argentina, who was studying there. The South African trips have included work to help launch a creche. That's the South African name for a preschool. I was invited on one of my trips to offer, with the help of a Zulu translator, some workshops on neural development to the staff of several creches. That experience certainly got my neural synapses snapping. In 2019, before traveling to South Africa, we participated in a Habitat for Humanity project in Zambia. My son Nick has also become more of a global citizen. He and his partner Allison and their baby infant son Noah live and work in the United Kingdom. He met Allison, who is from South Africa, while traveling in Romania. Many of the current generation of young adults have lessons to offer to we older Americans about what it means to be a global citizen, politically and environmentally. This past year, our travels have been motivated by our desire to see our two grandsons. Because of their parents' lives and career decisions, it means we have to travel internationally to spend time with them. Now, in my travels, some common repeated themes have emerged. One, the journeys are usually about family. Two, they, in addition to be mind-expanding, often have a service component. Three, we usually bring back some souvenirs. Sometimes it's local artwork, or for Suzanne, fabrics. Often, for me, it's shells picked up on a beach or small stones from a hike. This year, I brought back a small bottle of special water. Finally, number 4, whenever possible in our travels, in North America and beyond, we seek out opportunities to connect with other Unitarian Universalists. In many countries, though, they only use the name Unitarian. Such experiences, both here in the U.S. and internationally, expand my appreciation for the multiple ways in which our faith expresses itself and how we have been able to truly find unity in our diversity. What I have seen and heard and felt in churches far afield is that even when we gather in different looking places and have different formats and styles of worship, we share many common threads that truly bind us together as siblings in faith. While we were in London last November to meet Noah, the youngest grandson, we spent 2 Sundays, one virtually and one in person, with the members of the new Unitarian Chapel, New Unity Unitarian Chapel in London. They have 2 historic buildings that serve as their church home. One is their primary worship space, and the other is used to a place to host social justice events in collaboration with the larger community. On their webpage, they offer this description. New Unity is a radically inclusive community dedicated to love and justice. We recognize that it is people who have the power and the responsibility to make a better world. We aim to build a fairer and kinder world through an extensive program of non-religious ministry, events, projects, and social justice work. We welcome all people of all backgrounds, sexualities, ages, and abilities, and we nurture a supportive, caring, and welcoming community. Whoever you are, they say, wherever you're from, whatever you look like, whoever you love, and however you identify, you are welcome here. We very much felt welcome, and we felt at home there. We did not get to meet their minister, the Rev Andy Pakula, an American Unitarian Universalist, as he was away on a brief sabbatical leave. It was disappointing, as his self-description seemed to be one of a colleague I would very much like to know. He said, "I did not take to religion as a young man. Indeed, I was vehemently atheistic and anti-religious. I'm still an atheist, and depending on definitions, I might still be called anti-religious. At least I am anti the kind of religion that fosters homophobia, transphobia, and misogyny, that promotes us versus them thinking, that insists that it knows the right answers, as if there was just one, that tells us what we should think, believe, and do, and dangles rewards and threatens punishments to get us to behave. Reverend Andy continues, I did not fit the mold, and I don't think any of us are meant to be shaped and manipulated to fit a mold of belief, perspective, sexuality, or ability. We're meant to be treasured as the people we are, and to be accepted, loved, and supported as we grow as individuals and join together to create a more just society. New Unity describes itself as being more like an American Unitarian Universalist congregation than like many British Unitarian churches. The latter tend to often be largely liberal Christians and wedded to traditions and, being English, rather reserved in their manner. Now, that sense of being reserved is true to some extent in New Unity. We experience them to have a bit of that classic British reserve. We discovered on the second Sunday there that Reverend Andy will only be with them for a few more months after he returns from sabbatical. They, like the Umpqua UUs, are in the midst of a ministerial search. Some of the elements of that process, which were addressed in that week's sermon, seems to have much in common with the processes of our own Unitarian Universalist Association's ministerial search. When we went to South Africa this year, we also went to church, both virtually and in person. The Cape Town Unitarians are very different from their English kin and from their American cousins in faith, and yet they share many common aspects of our shared faith. Now, this was not my first contact with the community in Cape Town. I first visited them during my first trip to South Africa in 2009. Back then, I did not notice much diversity, especially in the midst of a country and a city that is only about 20% white. Most of the congregation looked a lot like me. In our after-church chatting, I discovered that a number of the members were American expats living in South Africa, and several of them were retirees who were there in part because their retirement funds could go much further there. They came to church seeking community. In that longing, they share a common band with many of us here in the U.S. In 2015, I had a different kind of opportunity to connect with Cape Town folks. I discovered that year through a Seattle area ministers group that the Reverend Rue Milan, then minister of that congregation, was coming to the U.S. to attend General Assembly, which was in Portland, Oregon that year. When we heard he was going to be in Seattle several days before GA and was seeking a homestay and a ride to Portland, Suzanne and I reached out and invited him to spend a couple of days with us on Whidbey Island before we would travel together to GA. We had a great visit, spending time talking about theology and church dynamics and other ministry kind of stuff, as well as giving him a glimpse of our natural beauty and just spending some time hanging out together. When we came to South Africa the next January, we spent our time in KwaZulu-Natal province and did not make it to Cape Town. We were back again in 2019, and I Ubered into the city for church. What I saw there was a church that had been changing. It was more diverse, racially and economically. The mood, too, felt much more dynamic and inclusive than what I had experienced in my earlier visit. Due to family commitments, I was unable to linger and learn more about who those people were and what they were up to, but the feeling in that space was more upbeat and positive. This year, we got to spend more time with the Cape Town Unitarians. Because they, like many here in the U.S., were not yet meeting in person, our first Sunday, we joined them virtually. On that particular Sunday, Rue Milan was co-presenting the service. Rue now serves as a community minister affiliated with the congregation, engaging in pastoral care and resiliency work in the larger community, and as a private consultant. Rue spoke about how he and others in the congregation are supporting a garden project in one of the informal settlements on the edge of Cape Town. South Africa has the largest gap between wealth and poverty of any country in the world, and these so-called informal communities are home to the poorest of the poor. The goal of the garden project is to not merely meet an immediate need, but to work over time to meet continuing needs and to build supportive and accountable relationships with people in those communities. Sounds to me like the best kind of justice work. I pledge to explore how Unitarian Universalists in the U.S. might support projects undertaken by our Unitarian friends in Cape Town. On Thursdays, we joined in an online meditation led by the congregation's current minister, the Reverend Nima Taylor. The group included folks from around Cape Town, one logged in from Johannesburg, and one we discovered was just around the corner from where we were staying. We also had a delightful lunch with Reverend Nima. She is both an ordained minister who trained in Unity Church Seminary in Kansas City and a Zen teacher. On the following Sunday, we got to go to church in person. There I got my favorite souvenir from this year's journey to Cape Town. It's that small bottle of water I talked about. You see, we were there for their annual water communion. They gather together waters many bring, invite all to leave with a bit of those mingled and blessed waters. As is done in many U.S. UU congregations, they begin their church year with such a service. In Cape Town, they hold that service in January. Here and there, the church year has long been linked to the school year, and their school year begins in January. It was a sweet and meaningful service. Their first in the new hybrid format. Both those present in the sanctuary and those joining in virtually participated. I found myself during part of the service weeping softly. It was the best kind of weeping. My favorite part of the morning, though, was after the service, when we were invited to stay for tea and biscuits, as we would call them in the U.S., cookies. The cookies were mediocre, but the accompanying conversations were grand. I met and talked for a time with Gru Mugalanga, who is Congolese. Gru is currently a student at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago, where I attended seminary. This year, he is attending virtually and thus managing to avoid the cold Chicago winter. We talked about a theology professor, Dr. Michael Hogue, who had stretched both of our minds. He shared with me a notion, which I hope to explore with him more via email and WhatsApp, about the difference between Unitarianism in Africa and African Unitarianism. I also talked about permaculture with Sile Asua, a lay leader who had led the morning service, and Hans, whose last name I didn't get, about a dance for Desmond Tutu event that was coming up in the community the following weekend. This congregation in a country which has experienced much hardship has found joy. They have learned to laugh and to cry more easily. They were fun and funny and so sweet to us. We stayed for nearly 2 hours. So much for coffee hour. The Cape Town Unitarians list on their webpage the same 7 principles and 6 sources as do the member congregations who are part of the UUA. They too place a flaming chalice in their midst as a symbol of their religious faith. They have chosen to use one that incorporates in its design the blossom of a protea, a unique, lovely, yet strong South African flower. They describe themselves simply as a spiritual community committed to honoring the inherent worth and dignity of every person. By the way, one of the differences between this community and congregations is the United States is that they spell honor, H-O-N-O-U-R, rather than H-O-N-O-R, as we would. Yet the core sentiment is a shared value, a value expressed here and there with enthusiasm and with love. The Cape Town Unitarians' mission statement reads, "Inspired by our shared values and the collective wisdom of humanity, we come together as an open and inclusive community to grow in awareness, understanding, and insight, to nurture each other on our unique paths, to act toward a just and sustainable world." Or as they expressed it on the t-shirt Hans modeled for us, which unfortunately they had run out of in my size, Cape Town Unitarians, it reads, justice, equality, sustainability, shared love and respect, liberal spirituality, accountability, open heart and mind. That certainly sounds like the aspirations of any Unitarian Universalist or Unitarian congregation anywhere on the globe. May we in our community continue with them to seek to manifest such values. May it be so.
Our world is one world. What touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes, with love or hate we make a bridge or wall. Our world is one world. Its ways of wealth affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many holes, but where our hearts can hear a different call.
Our closing words of benediction are gifted us to us by the American Unitarian Universalist religious educators, Alicia Hauser and Susan Warren. We are Unitarian Universalists.
with minds that think
Hearts that love.
and hands ready to serve,
Together we care for our earth.
and work for friendship and peace in our world.
Salam.
Shalom,
Amen.
and blessed be.